Paul's words in those letters that describe the mystery, like what he said about marriage in Ephesians chapter 5, allude to there being a whole lot greater depth to the story. I'm Doug, and I'm here to show you that the Old Testament is where that depth can be found, in dramatic detail. I call this untangling the gospel because we usually hear about those two testaments talked about separately, as though they tell different stories. And that leads to a minimal understanding of God and His love for us. Believe it or not, God created Israel to be a mirror for everyone, even us today, so we can clearly see the condition of our relationship with Him. Think of the Bible as a 4-act play, with a prelude that lays out the events of creation, mankind in the garden, and all the way through the great flood. Then the curtains for Act 1 open, with God making Abraham the father of the most significant people in the history of the world. The story dwells on God's miraculous interactions with Israel, growing her into a family of about 2 million, having Moses lead her out of slavery in Egypt, displaying His wonders as she went, pausing at Mount Sinai to receive directions for a new way of life, being overseen by the Levitical priesthood, and a 40-year delay for their stubbornness. Act 1 closes with Moses dying and Joshua leading them through the Jordan into the promised land and winning the battle at Jericho. Act 2 contains the accounts of Israel's faithfulness, her ups and downs under judges, then good and bad kings, and prophets relaying God's message during those times. The theme throughout deals with His promise. She would be His wife and eventually bear His son, her ultimate king. Those prophets described how He pulled her out of the world's filth. He cleaned her up to let her beauty shine. He told her of His love and gave her gifts proving His affection. He provided for all her needs and let her enjoy her freedom. Even so, with that freedom, she flirted with others and had affairs. That's what He considered the alliances she made with nearby nations. She did that in order to have military strength and access to material goods. All that time she should have relied solely on Him. Act 2 closes in sadness, with her bearing the consequences of her indiscretions. There were battle losses and captivities, moderate rebuilding and then occupation by foreigners, and finally, marital separation. Act 3 opens with Israel being alone. Her husband, her lover, only a memory. There are 3 scenes in this act. The first is laid out in Proverbs. It's the practical lessons she's learned over the years, midway saying, the hard knocks of life can lead to the fearing of the Lord, and that's the beginning of wisdom. The second scene comes from Ecclesiastes. She's questioning the value of her life, essentially saying she's done nothing to truly improve it. She's going to end up the same as when she started. There's nothing new under the sun. Even a person's grand accomplishments are meaningless. They're vanity. They might appear great on the outside where others can see and give compliments, but deep in the soul, they're nothing more than fluff. The last chapter somberly says, life that's lived long enough ends the same for everyone. Eyes not able to see clearly, ears barely able to hear, teeth that are missing so eating isn't enjoyable, a mind that's become cloudy, hands that used to be strong now tremble, and a body that's unable to stand up straight. It concludes with, Get to know your Maker while you still can. The third and last scene is the Song of Songs. It describes Israel's hope, and it's a sensual story, with her longing for the day when she and the king, her lover, are finally rejoined in the luxurious house he built for her, with them on their marriage bed, in exquisite intimacy. She remembers laying there with him. He was poetically describing her and the romantic times when they rode together in his royal coach. Meanwhile, she goes out in the darkness each night, searching the streets for him, asking those she meets if they've seen him, and hoping for his soon return. There Act 3 closes on a hollow note. Act 4 of the Bible's play is the whole New Testament. That brings us back to the topic of Paul's letters, talking about a mystery. The mystery is the process by which God saves us. Earlier I said, believe it or not, he created Israel to be a mirror for everyone, even us today, so we can clearly see the condition of our relationship with him. Well, here's the deeper story, with the New and Old Testaments connected together. Like God had Moses lead Israel out of slavery in Egypt, he used the Old Testament rules and regulations to show us our situation. We were in a miserable existence. We've seen his wonders, though. Maybe not the column of fire and smoke or the parting of the sea, but we've at least recognized the magnificence of his creation. And we've all gone through some sort of desert experience, realizing the mess we're in and the grandeur of who he is. Like he guided Israel into the promised land, God has also led us into his kingdom, following Joshua. That's Jesus' Hebrew name. And like he gave her the freedom to pursue her desires in that new land, even to the point of becoming disgusting, he let each of us dabble in whatever we wanted. That's what chapter 1 of Romans says. Then, when we've each pondered our faith, he, the lover of our souls, our King, reveals his desire for us, and that reignites the romance. Well, here's how Paul brings the first 3 acts of that play to a climax. His passage describing the marriage relationship of a man and a woman ends saying that the relationship has been a mystery, predicting Christ becoming our husband. Reading that with the prediction in mind, we can be positive that he consciously and permanently erased every spot and blemish from us. We are his bride, and it didn't matter what of our dabblings there were. They're gone. They're erased. And he's formally, in front of everyone, without embarrassment, he's presenting us to himself at the altar of marriage, seeing us as sinless, beautiful, radiant, and perfect in every way. His marriage vow, his promise is to never harm us, to always nurture us, protect us, provide us with all we need, and grow us in the depths of his love. That familiar tradition of marriage conveys the magnitude of the intimacy that God desires for each of us to have with him. That in turn results in us giving birth to a new creation, our second birth, into an eternal life in his kingdom. If this seems too far-fetched for you, remember Jesus telling his 2 disciples on the road to Emmaus that the Old Testament was written about himself. It tells us the depths of God's desire for us and about our desperate need for him. And it also lays out his plan to make it all come together perfectly, but it's presented in the form of a mystery, using accounts of heroes and villains, sins and failures and disobedience to obscure it. He's made it that way so that the only ones who can recognize it are those who are searching for him, the eternal judge and the creator of the universe, as our friend. That's what grace is, his friendship with us. Well, until next time, be blessed.